Hello, everyone. My name is Ole Kagan, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator with LA County Library, and I welcome you to Work Ready, Rethinking College. Before we get going with today's event, I'll take care of some housekeeping, do the land acknowledgement, and tell you a little bit about the Work Ready program. If you can hear me and see the slide up on the screen, then you are good to go. However, if you're having trouble hearing me or seeing the slide on the screen, do let me know in the chat and I will do my best to assist. If you'd like to listen to this presentation on the phone, you can do that by calling 1-669-900-6833 and using the access code 85617. Oh, sorry, I got the wrong access. 853-3292-7805. It's also displayed on the slide. And the passcode is 123123, of course. You may have noticed that the mics and video for attendees are disabled, and that is so that everyone can focus on our conversation today. However, we do very much welcome your questions and intend to incorporate those questions into the conversation. Questions should go in the Q&A box. That's the one with the two little speech bubbles. And if you have comments that you want to put in during the session, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. That's the one with the single speech bubble. And in fact, we do have a question already. Will this presentation be recorded and available to watch at a later time for those who couldn't attend? And the answer is yes. As with the majority of our Work Ready programs, this is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel probably later this afternoon. And everybody who's here and everybody who registered for the program will get a follow-up email with a video link to that presentation. So if you have to leave early or you miss something, don't worry, you'll be able to watch the program and share it with friends at a later time. All right, now I'm going to do the land acknowledgement. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Kizh, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We're grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We're dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Kizh Nation, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. To learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission website at lanic.lacounty.gov. I'm going to post that in the chat as well. All right, and now I'd like to tell you about the Work Ready program. Work Ready started in December of 2020 with the purpose of helping people get a job, improve their work situation, and plan a more sustainable career path. We do that in two ways. One is we lend out laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots out of 27 library locations for 6-week loans. That breaks down one barrier to applying for a job and getting online training. And two is we provide virtual events, just like this one, on a range of work-related topics, from the basics like resumes, cover letters, interviews, to deep dives into various careers and other subjects that could help you succeed at work, like Rethinking College. And you can see over 50 of those past classes at any time by checking out our work and career playlist on our YouTube channel. That's going to have past work-ready videos and more. You could share that link, share any of those videos with those you think will be interested, and check them out yourself. Some of the topics that you may be interested in particularly may have been covered in the past. So definitely give our playlist a scroll. The Work Ready program is made possible due to funds provided by the American Rescue Plan. And before I introduce our speaker, I also want to let you know we have a great program coming up for you next week, and that is Work Ready Successful Reentry for LA County residents. For those who are recently released from incarceration, LA County can assist you. Join staff from our Justice, Career, and Opportunities Department as they explain the reentry process and share helpful programs for adults impacted by the justice system. And that, of course, is free, just as all of our programs are. And if you're interested in learning more about programs provided by the LA County Library, you can go to our website at lacountylibrary.org. On the top right-hand side, click Events, and that'll give you all of our programs for all ages. And if you want just virtual events, you can hover over that Events button and a drop-down will come up, hit Virtual Programs, and you'll get the Zoom events just like this one. All right, and now it's time to get going with today's program. Karin Klein is our guest for today. Karin has been an editorial writer for the Los Angeles Times for the past 22 years, covering education, health, and science, and has won many awards and fellowships. She's a graduate of Wellesley College who majored in linguistics and psychology, and then went on to graduate school in journalism at UC Berkeley. She loves hiking and is a certified wilderness naturalist. Her previous book, 50 Hikes in Orange County, educated hikers about the natural and human history of the local trails. She has 3 grown kids and 1 granddaughter and continues to live in the family home in Laguna Beach with her partner, Rick Shane, a semi-retired film editor, her 16-year-old cat, and 2 dogs. Her most recent projects included returning to college to study for a certificate as an archaeological field technician at Palomar College. Archaeology has been a huge interest of hers since childhood, and this spring she has had the good fortune to see 17,000-year-old cave paintings in Périgord, France. She's also created a monarch butterfly way station in her front and backyards. During today's event, we'll be discussing her forthcoming book, Rethinking College, a guide to thriving without a degree, to be released in August by Harper Horizon. And without further ado, I bring to our virtual stage, Karin Klein.
Oh, we lost Zoom for a second. Hold on.
Sure.
There we go.
There you are. Welcome,
Hi.
Karin. So glad to have you. So much appreciate your time coming on and discussing your book with us.
I really appreciate being invited.
So I've read the book and it was inspiring and delightful. And I want to know and tell the people, how did you get started on this topic of rethinking the need for college?
It actually started in a sort of backwards way a long time ago, something like 20 years ago or more, and has been brewing in my mind for many years, and I've added to it. And in ways it pertains to a lot of our audience, which was that
Mhm.
I had a friend who had moved from the Sacramento area to Orange County. She was a longtime office manager. She was really smart, articulate, had great references from her employers. And she came down here to be near family, and she looked for a job as an office manager. And she couldn't even get in the door because she didn't have a college degree. And I thought this was just crazy, but it was, no one would even look at her. It was just, the door was shut as soon as they saw no college degree. And I started hearing more stories like that. And in fact, then I started hearing stories about people with college degrees going to work for organizations that said, well, no matter how you really perform here, in order to really get into our professional track, you're pretty much going to need a graduate degree. And I said, this has gone a little crazy. I mean, they couldn't say what they would get out of a graduate degree. And the people who got them said, wasn't really more qualified afterward than before. And so at about that time, a few years after, the big College for All movement started. And Los Angeles Unified School District, which I was writing about at the time, had put in a requirement that all students had to take the full range of courses required for entry to Cal State and UC with no less than a C in those courses because they wanted all of the students to qualify for college. And I thought, well, I definitely want more students to qualify for college, especially the underrepresented ones, but it's not for everybody. Why do they have to do all this if their interests lie elsewhere? So these were things that I started writing about at the time. And in fact, it didn't work out to say that they all needed to get a C. So they had to drop the requirement down to a D, which meant those students didn't qualify for Cal State. Um, and that was what led me during the pandemic to start thinking about how can we redo some of what we do with education, especially since at the time a lot of students couldn't attend college or were doing it remotely and having a rough time with it. And so I wrote a piece that's in the spring after the pandemic had sort of calmed down a little bit, saying, what can we think about for the future? What can we learn from all this? And one thing that I thought was very important was that we need to do away with what's called degree inflation, which means requiring degrees and higher degrees for jobs where they're not really necessary, instead of looking at the qualifications of the person. What are their skills? What's their personality? What will they bring to that job? In truth, college degrees had become a way for lazy employers to hire people. They didn't really look at the person. They looked at the degree. They looked at the piece of paper. And right after the pandemic, it happened to come out, that piece, just at the right time. And because the pandemic had led to shortages of manpower, a lot of employers started looking at hiring based on skills instead of on pieces of paper. At the same time, the Black Lives Matter movement made employers get more serious about diversifying their workforce, and that they had to, because not a whole lot of Black and Latino candidates had college degrees, they had to open their doors to those people. So that was what led to my thinking about, okay, we now understand that people shouldn't need a college degree, but what happens if you don't have a college degree? What happens if you don't want a college degree or aren't sure what you want to do with your life? There are a whole bunch of reasons not to go to college right away. Maybe later, maybe never. But I'm a big believer in people discovering themselves, discovering new things they can do. And that's what led to writing this book, was that to give people a guide. And little did I know as I did it, that it really is useful for new college graduates. Because a lot of college graduates come out with degrees that they're not quite certain what to do with. They think that having a degree is going to automatically lead to a job. Then they get disappointed that they can't find a job. So they need to think in these terms too, about directing your life, about trying things, about getting out in the world, thinking creatively about what you're going to do with your life. For that matter, while I was posting about the book on Facebook, friend of mine who's a retiree said, you need to write a version of this book for retirees. And I thought about that, and I'm still thinking about that, and I might, but it's actually, it would be a very similar book to what I have. A whole lot of what is in this book relates to retirees as well. And in fact, that's how I went back to school to study to be an archaeological field technician, was that at one point I decided to take my own advice about how to look at community college programs. And lo and behold, there was this great program within driving distance of my home.
So this is I had exactly the same thought when I was reading the book. I I think for the most part, it didn't, I mean, it was, there were some young people, there were some people who were not young, as that you used as examples. But I was thinking, "Well, I really want to do that. That sounds really interesting." And because there was all about not just earning money, not just getting into a career, but also about living a meaningful work life or a purposeful work life. And I think going back to the way that universities were traditionally thought of, there was two purposes. One, it was, you're preparing people for a career, And then there was also the second part, which is developing the person, developing critical thinking skills, a wide range of knowledge. In other words, preparing people for life. So do you think that these parallel experiences, the getting career preparation and critical thinking skills and the whole person are possible, are they still valid and useful with college? And then what are some ways that people can get them without college, or is it possible to still develop those kind of purposes without college?
Yeah, I want to be clear that I'm a big believer in college. I think college
Mhm.
is a great thing. I went to college. My three kids went to college. We were all sort of natural students, and it was our natural environment to go to college. As I point out in the book, I then went to work writing 5-paragraph essays for a living as an editorial writer. So clearly it was a good fit for me. I don't believe that college is just for getting a career. And I'm
Mhm.
sorry that our society has made it about that. But I understand it because college costs so darn much that people want to be sure that they're not going to be buried in debt and that they're going to be able to get along in life. At the same time, I think education has value for itself. And learning to be a thinking person, learning to be a reading person, learning to examine the world around us are very valuable things. And college can definitely teach us that. I think most college experiences do teach us that. I also think both things can be learned without college. And in fact, one of the people I talked to for the book said to me, you would be astonished that most people who graduate college then stop reading books. They get their bachelor's and they consider their education done. I'm a big believer in education, whether that's occurring at a regular standard college, whether that's occurring in at a library, whether that's occurring in online as we run around and look at all the many, many things we can learn there. I'm a believer in perpetual education. And most of the people that I interviewed who do not have college degrees are perpetual learners. They are excited about the next thing they're going to do. They say a business begins to die at the point where it stops growing. I'm not sure that's true, but I certainly believe that people's minds begin to die at the point where they stop growing, where they stop
Mhm.
looking for the next thing, stop being interested in what they can be next. So there are these days between massive online courses, YouTube, the internet. There are so many ways to be an educated person, not to mention picking up a regular old book, which I still love doing. So I'd rather, I think a person is more educated who might not go to college, but actually learns things and thinks about learning things and thinks about expanding their minds and their experiences more than someone who gets a bachelor's degree and thinks, okay, that's it. I'm done. Now I will just go on and make my money. So both work. It depends more on the person and how they treat their college education or how they treat their career in life than it does about which path you choose.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's nobody needs to be on rails. The My favorite thing about the book was that it opened my mind. It made me think widely about the possibilities that are out there.
It did that
So,
for me too. I didn't know about a lot of these. You go out and you start talking to people and you start exploring the internet and all of a sudden worlds start opening up.
actually, I'm
So
I'm curious how I mean, you spoke to a lot of people for the book. There's a lot of really good and inspiring stories and a great variety of paths. How did you find the people that you interviewed for the book?
All kinds of places. Facebook might be the social media for older people, of which I, freely admit I am one. But for any age group, it is a great place for groups. So I wanted to find a makeup artist. So I went into some groups for makeup artists. I wanted to find welders. So I went into a group for welders. I seemed a little out of place there, but and the
That's a
great thing is
interesting, very interesting subculture. And then you talk to in the book an underwater welder who earns in six figures.
yes, yes, he does. He earns about $150,000 a year and gets to live at home in, I believe it's Wyoming. Um, most of the time. So he's right near, open spaces that
Mhm.
he loves doing. And then when he goes off on a job, he's coordinating a team and it's very intense work. And then he goes back to his family um, and has a great time. So yeah, and there are community college programs for learning these things, for learning the diving part of it, for learning the marine science part of it, for learning the welding part of it. People did so many different things. And sometimes it involved grand adventure, traveling worldwide. And sometimes, in one case, the case of Kyle Chambers, he was a guy who lived in his neighborhood and got a couple of go nowhere jobs for a while. And then someone got him a sort of low level job at Princess Cruises. He wasn't making much money. He was making 37,000 a year when he started. And he was sort of going along. And then at some point, he got picked to beta test some new program they had going.
Mhm.
And something in Kyle switched on at that moment. And that's what I mean about it's more about what's inside you
Mhm.
than what's around you. And he decided that he was going to try to break that system. He was going to find its weak points. And he spent a lot of time on this. He educated himself
Mhm.
during his night hours on YouTube. Um, and and he did, and he found this stuff, and the IT people thought he was just fantastic, and they recommended him for his next job. And then he went into another job where they were developing a new system, and he decided he was going to put everything into this. And he worked for a woman who acted as a mentor and taught him a lot of stuff. And he's now making well into six figures. He ended up leaving the cruise business
Mhm.
and moving to Texas now. But he found that part of him that says, I can do anything. I can make things happen. I can
Mhm.
do the biggest, best job that no one believed could be done on this. And as soon as he told himself he was going to do that, he started doing it.
Mhm.
And up to that point, he was just sort of floating along.
Yeah, it's a combination of interest and hard work and, self-education. And this is really, I mean, YouTube University. Uh,
Yeah,
and also, of course, the library has a lot of free education. There's so many free resources out there. Um, but
yeah,
yeah, the combination of those things seems to have really, sort of catapulted him in his
yes.
career.
And it is, for education and reading, and the library is an important part
Mhm.
of that. There was one young entrepreneur, he's in LA. He
Mhm.
owns a company called Happy Ice, and he missed the Philadelphia ices, which are kind of like Italian ices that they had when he came to LA.
Mhm.
And so he decided he had to start a company doing it. He was a tattoo artist. He took all his savings from being a tattoo artist. He found a mentor back in Philadelphia who trained him. He worked for nothing for a few months, but that mentor set him up with the equipment at a very low cost and all the information he needed. And he started this company and he's doing incredibly well. He
Mhm.
developed a method for scooping so it comes out looking like a rainbow of colors. And we just had this whole long talk. And then I asked him at the end, if you had advice for others following your path, what would it
Mhm.
be? And he said, read. That wasn't what I expected from an entrepreneur who did all these
Mhm.
daring things, but he said something like 90% of the mistakes I made were because I didn't read first, and I would have avoided
Mhm.
those if I had picked up books and read from the start.
It's interesting because part of the section, you have a whole chapter on entrepreneurship, and one of the things I noted in that chapter was that the commonality from the people that you talked to was that they like to connect with others, that they were sort of almost voracious in their search for information, whether that was, like you mentioned, reading, but also talking to others and connecting and trying to create those networks and look around everywhere they could for the information.
I think that's part of it. They keep looking, they keep asking people. I think one talent or skill that we have really underrated in our schools, and I think perhaps in our culture, and yet it's incredibly important to careers, is interpersonal skills, the
Mhm.
ability to get along with people, the ability to be the first to reach out to people, the ability to accept what they have to give us, but to remember not to just accept, but to give back, which was something I really saw in entrepreneurs that they did not, even in their dealings with me, they they then would come back and say, what can I do for you? I'm coming
Mhm.
to town. Can we meet? Can I help you with anything? Let
Mhm.
me know. People who succeed do that. They reach out to people, they get along with teams. One of the interesting things is that I myself watched a MOOC on entrepreneurship, and it was an MIT one. And the man there had done a lot of research on what makes for being an entrepreneur. And he said everybody thinks that entrepreneurs are this sort of lone wolves. They go off on their own. They just want to be, do their own thing. And he said, actually, successful entrepreneurs are team workers, that
Mhm.
almost entirely you see them working with people.
So I'm interested. I mean, we'll shift a little bit, and we had a good question in the chat here because you mentioned that we meant community college and training. How would you suggest paying for college, as even community college is a little bit expensive per credit?
Would I say that it is expensive?
No, how would you suggest paying for it? I thought about
Well,
this too because I went to community college. So,
yeah, I mean, in California, we're very generous with financial aid for students at community colleges and at Cal State and UC. Basically, a
mhm,
family of four making less than $80,000 a year gets a free ride on tuition, and the problem is the cost of living. So in my archaeology classes, there are incredibly motivated people, and I was working full time and taking this class, and I went in and I sort of moaned to another student, oh, I'm working full
mhm,
time and I'm doing all this homework in addition to this. And he said, well, I work full time too. Turns out he's a
mhm,
chef who works 50 hours a week. I mean, another guy is a trainer, a personal trainer who works 40 hours a week. They have to do that to be able to live. And then they take their courses on top of it. That's not
mhm,
easy. But they do it. They do it.
mhm,
I wrote an editorial at one point when all these billionaires were withdrawing their money from Ivy League schools
mhm,
over the protests. And I said, remove your money, don't remove your money. That's beside the point. If you have $50 million that you're looking to give to higher education, give it to a community college. It won't be used to create another chair. It will be used to educate a whole lot of people who are otherwise working full-time jobs just trying to get through.
mhm.
Um, but not that many people took me up on it
Yet.
yet.
So let's shift gears again. So many of our work-ready audience are older and may not be in a position to pick up and move to a new place, take on a low-paying internship or apprenticeship, which, I mean, in the book, there's a whole section on internship and apprenticeships and volunteering, but that's not for everybody. So based on your research for Rethinking College and the folks that you've spoken with, what advice would you have for our older adult job seekers who, may need just a job where they are? What would you advise them with regards to their job search?
Well, I think you start with yourself. Start with what you can do. Start with what you like, but you can't do yet. Start with your dreams.
Mhm,
It's, the word passion really gets overused, but one of the sources I talked to put it in terms of what makes you glad to get up in the morning.
mhm,
And, writing has made me glad to get up in the morning. Hiking has made me glad to get up in the morning. Both of those have led me to great places. Now,
mhm,
archaeology makes me glad to get up in the morning, and I don't know where it will lead me. Maybe it will, just lead me to be a very good volunteer. Maybe it will
mhm,
lead me to get a job as an archaeology technician. I'm not really sure. I'm at this stage in my life where I don't need to worry about that over much, and writing will always be a part of my life. But think about what interests you and then find a way to start doing it, whether it's by educating yourself on YouTube, and YouTube is a great resource for learning. I know people, well, there's a guy in the book who learned, he's a video editor now. He learned
mhm,
most of it by going on YouTube. And now he gives sessions on YouTube to teach people how to do it. That's that same giving back thing that you see.
mhm,
There are the MOOCs, the massive online open courses that are available all over the place. And the
mhm,
book has information about how you can actually search for MOOCs in your
mhm,
field with responsible organizations. So I think starting and doing gets you to know what you do like and what you don't like. And at some point, you have to just do, whether it's by educating yourself or doing it, trying it. And the possibilities are all over the place. If you have people skills, look at organizations that need customer service people. They are
Mhm.
all over the place. And a lot of them have dropped their requirements for college degrees. They
Mhm.
realize that is not really needed at all. And I interviewed a few people who are in customer service and HR type work and management of accounts, which
Mhm.
also involves interpersonal skills. Um, you know, Sell yourself on skills and
Mhm.
not on what paper you have.
There are a lot of assessments too for to figure out what you should be going for. I mean, if you're at in a place where whether you're an emerging adult or you're an older adult or anywhere in between, and you're not sure what to do, there are many tests out there, and the book actually has an assessment. It has
Yeah.
just questions that aren't just like, you get an answer, it's a yes or no. They're open-ended questions to get you thinking. So Karen, how did you come up with the questions in that assessment section?
Um, I started asking the internet for those
Mhm.
questions. And then I changed them completely, but I needed a
Mhm.
starting point
Yeah.
for it. So I garnered those questions. They got me thinking about things that would be
Mhm.
more useful ways to ask it. I talked to other people about those questions and is this useful for you? Is that useful for
Mhm.
you if you were? And I got a lot of good feedback and I built my questionnaires from there. So that chapter 2 is almost all, I think it's 2 or 3 different assessments. One is,
Yeah.
do you belong in college, which might not be of that much use to this audience, although it might. I mean, there's
Oh,
college is readily available and it
yeah.
is in LA. There are many community colleges. There's a costume designer who got her start by taking a sewing class
Mhm.
at Pasadena College. There are a few Cal States right there. And a UC. So, it's not like you have to pay for room and board that you're not already
Mhm.
paying for. There are more part-time possibilities than
Mhm.
before. I'm doing archaeology one class at a time right now. In a year I plan to pick it up full time.
Mhm.
So there you can always find education. You can always, see what is right for you. And then the other questions are about what kind of person are you? What do you like? What do you like doing? Does this turn you on or that turn you on?
Mhm.
If someone said, going to a large party, someone like me, I would shrink. That's not my
Mhm.
thing. Big, loud, noisy parties. But it says something about me as a person to know that. So it's getting to know ourselves better. In the book, I tell the story about how my plan in college, I was a linguistics major, loved linguistics, was planning to become a professor and follow this all my life. And then I was in a senior year class where they were talking about study that was really meaningless. And it was so meaningless that I even said, why are they doing this study? It just seems obvious from the
Mhm.
start. And the professor said, you're right. You're right. But this is where we are in linguistics. If you get a PhD in linguistics, this is what you'll be doing for a living, is you have to do these little tiny incremental studies. And I thought, oh, this is not me. I need to come up with something else and I need to
Mhm.
come up with it fast.
Yeah.
Um, so I did my assessment questions in ways come from my self-assessment, in which I had to think about what kind of person am I? What do I do? What do I actually do? I write papers. I write them
Mhm.
really fast. I actually write them better when I'm on a
Mhm.
tight deadline.
Mhm.
I just spread my notes around me and I type on my little oh, I forget what it was at that time, but it was some popular little, electric typewriter where I had to use erasable paper. Was long before computers are used for that. I love to learn about everything, but clearly when we talk about these little nitty gritty things, I don't love learning about little tiny nitty gritty things. So I'm
Mhm.
sort of an intellectual dilettante. I like learning everything, but not everything about anything. And I love to write. And so that led me to what involves deadlines, what involves
Mhm.
writing, what involves learning about everything. I knew that I didn't for myself care if I made a whole lot of money, but I also was not from a wealthy background at all. And I knew I
Mhm.
would have to be self-sufficient and earn a living. So that led me to journalism. And I have had no reason to regret it. Except maybe I should have become an archaeologist a little earlier.
I like that there's a question in chapter 2 here. How tidy is your desk? And the first response is A, desk? I was supposed to use my desk? I mainly use that to throw random stuff on.
Yeah, that's me.
I
I've
really
gotten
like that one. But
better.
it's interesting to think about. Like that's a question that, because there's depending on the job, the expectations for the use of the desk, how tidy it is. Is it a desk or is it a work table? I mean, is it a drafting table? I mean,
Yeah,
does it have a lot of paper on it, or is it all on the computer? Or do you not have a desk at all? You're just outdoors all the time.
yeah. Or it also leads beyond that to, do you think in organized ways? Do you
Hmm.
think in tidy ways? Some jobs are great for that, and some jobs are terrible for that. I'm not judging having a messy desk or a tidy desk, though
Hmm.
I'm really working on making mine a lot tidier. But but it tells you something about where you will fit in life. I hate dressing up. Newsrooms are not places where people dress up. My sister became a banker where she was dressed to the nines every
Hmm.
day. And my mom would look at me and say, well, you don't, Lynn dresses like a real professional. And I say, yeah, and I think, hiking pants are appropriate office attire, but I'm fine where I am.
To each their own. So there's so many different careers out there. And we had a question that that I know a lot of people are interested in, because people here are interested in finding out, well, what careers that don't require college, or at least don't require a 4 year, because a lot of careers require training, but
Right.
what careers that don't require a 4 year degree what are some examples of well-paying jobs that don't require a 4 year degree?
Well, there are a ton of them in the book, so I
Mhm.
can't I can't
Yeah.
start repeating all of them. But there are, like I said, entrepreneurs. You get to judge your own background. That's up to you. And there are so many ways to be an entrepreneur doing what it is you like. I know a young woman who learned how to crochet on YouTube and now
Mhm.
produces beautiful stuff. She's not at the point where she wants to sell them, but she could if she wanted
Mhm.
to. I have a hobby of creating habitat for monarch butterflies. I could grow a whole bunch of milkweed and sell
Mhm.
it and teach people how to create their own habitats for monarch butterflies. Anything you love doing can be turned into something.
Yeah.
There are the artistic areas that have long been open to people without degrees. For a while, they got a little bit more that way. There are courses at community
Mhm.
colleges. There are groups that you can join. You can be a makeup artist. You can be a baker. One of the people in here in the
That was
book.
a great story.
Yeah, he tried going to college. It just wasn't for him. He because a neighbor suggested it, he built a wood-fired oven to
Mhm.
bake bread just as a lark. And he started baking bread. He said it was terrible. But he redid his barn. He invited friends over. Eventually, his bread got better and better. And it was recently named by, I think it was Gourmet Magazine, as one of the 10 best breads in America. He has this little bakery. He has employees. As a way of giving back, he has started an internship, and you can go to his place in New Hampshire, I think it is, and live out in the country and learn how to make bread and go do your own thing. So you can look at companies there are a lot of companies that are listed in the book that are open to people who do not have college degrees. Of course, you can always go to coding camp, and
Mhm.
one of the people in the book did that and is doing incredibly well. This was a guy who said that he came out of school basically illiterate.
Mhm.
Um, there's another guy who never even went to coding camp. He just had a thing for it. He started out doing the computers for a little video store. And he just built his skills because he loved doing it. And now he's making about
Mhm.
$200,000 working for a medical company.
Yeah.
So there's, you can always learn a new skill that is hot out there. Coding goes up and down. But this will be, coding will always be a good skill to have. It'll be a basic skill.
Actually, one thing that I wanted to highlight is the trades. There's a whole section on skilled trades. And the trades are an outstanding career path for somebody who doesn't want to spend a whole lot of time in school. The trades require training, require apprenticeship, require time to work up. And we had a panel on the trades as part of a work ready program. So if you're interested in the trades, you can always go back to our panel. But I just want to read a few of the professions here, or the careers, and then what they earn, if you don't mind, Karen. I found them in the book here. So we got like construction manager, $98,890. Elevator technician, $97,860. Power plant operator, $94,790. And then you get all the way down to, like electrician, $60,040. That's, these are their averages. These are not like that's exactly what you'll earn, because electricians can certainly earn more than 60,000 and less than 60,000. Plumbers, very similar, drywall finisher, welders, underwater welders make a lot more than that. But
They make a
uh,
lot of money. And
but yeah.
be aware also, those are nationwide averages. So
Mhm.
speaking in LA is more expensive, right? So the incomes are going to be higher for people who are doing this work in California in general and LA in particular.
I also want to give a shout out to the Hospitality Training Academy. This is an organization that trains people for jobs in hospitality, in various areas of hospitality, particularly working in the kitchen, working in kitchens, working in hotels. And you do the training. It's like, I don't know how many weeks of training. It was 8 weeks of training or something, totally free. And then they put you in a union job. They find you a job, they get you a union job. And in the beginning, you're going to be working all the time. You're going to be working weird hours because you're low on the ranking. You don't have that seniority. But as you gain the seniority, you get to choose your shifts. You earn a whole lot. You can get additional training.
And
It's a
there's no reason why a hotel manager needs a bachelor's
Yeah.
degree, although we required it for a long time, and a lot of places still do, even a
Mhm.
master's in
Yeah.
hospitality. And imagine the learning you would do actually being on the job learning it. So
Mhm.
that's why the book is a lot about learning by doing. And maybe what you learn is that you don't want to do that. You certainly will
Mhm.
pick up some skills doing it. And it will bring, it's someone I know calls it putting yourself in the way of, meaning that if you're thinking about something and you get out there, things come your way. And it seems sort of mystical, but it's
Mhm.
not. It's that you are out there ready to see the things that you weren't noticing before. And
Mhm.
others who didn't know you were interested in that see you because you're out there doing it and looking and asking.
As like the luckiest person who has worked the hardest. The person worked into their luck.
Yes, that's it. But there are in the book there are, community college programs, not 2-year programs where you can learn to be a beer maker and go work for a beer maker and maybe start your own microbrewery. I mean, is that something that interests you? Maybe not. Or you can learn wind energy technology
Mhm.
at community college. There are so many possibilities there. Like I said, it all to me, it came instead of just looking at my closest community college and what they had in archaeology, I did a
Mhm.
search for archaeology community college near me. And
Mhm.
oh, right outside where my closest community colleges were was this amazing archaeology program that I had no idea existed.
Mhm.
If I didn't go ask, I never would have found it.
That's a great point about the community college, different programs offered at community colleges, because there's in the greater LA area, there's community colleges all over the place, and each of them offer different programs. So if
You
you're
do.
willing to drive, because you drive, I think it was an hour to get to your archaeology
Yeah,
program.
almost an hour each way. So I try to reduce the number of days I have to go.
But the
But
good
I
thing about
like
community colleges
driving.
is that there's always, you get classes you get there every Tuesday and Thursday or something, so you don't have to
Yeah.
go every day.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, even when I
Uh,
went to UCLA, I lived off campus. So I didn't go every day.
Yeah, I think that's a big mistake people make is that if they're going to a four-year college, there's so much thought that goes into, is this the exact right college? Is that the
Mhm,
exact right college? I mean, I belong to groups of these parents where I just feel like saying, relax, please. They'll go to college, they'll be fine, more that what should they do this summer, to look good to a college? And my feeling is they should get a job. They should learn about the work world. And that actually will look impressive to a college, which doesn't just want kids who
mhm,
are burnishing themselves.
mhm,
So those all people, when they come to community college, tend to think, oh, community colleges are all alike, where they
mhm,
would never do that if they were going to a four-year college. Community colleges are not all alike. They all have special areas. Some of those areas have been especially well funded by
mhm,
wealthy local people who are interested in seeing more of that happen in their area. And so that was the mistake I made. I just looked at my
mhm.
local colleges. I just assumed every community college would have archaeology courses, right?
But you found one that did.
But I did, but I
Yeah,
had to
that
go
you
look.
had to search.
You have to, yeah, you have to look at what it is you want to do, not
Mhm,
what your closest community college will offer you. Chances are there's a community college that offers something akin to what you want that
mhm.
is within commuting distance.
Just generally good advice when looking for educational opportunities. You don't give up after the first no, or after the first, search that didn't work out. Keep searching. There's just so much stuff out there.
Yeah. I mean, my first internship, I applied for an internship at a paper that I really had no chance of getting the internship at. And I didn't get the internship, by the way.
Mhm.
But they liked me enough that they had heard about another newspaper that had an internship and they sent me over there. And that was my first internship. So, get out there, get the rejection, but who knows where it will lead?
There's an interesting question here, and I wanna know what you think about this, Karen. When I first went to college, a non-traditional college student was an older person, sometimes a parent, sometimes someone with a career already who took classes with people my age, like younger people then. What would you consider a non-traditional student in today's world and workforce?
I don't really think there is a non-traditional student anymore. Um, there are a lot of older people going to college. I mean, I have to admit, I'm the only person with white hair in my archaeology classes. And I think the next oldest person was in his early 40s, and most of them were 20s and early 30s.
Mhm,
They were incredibly kind to me. I felt a little awkward at first, I'll admit. But everyone was really helpful, really kind, got to talking to them, found out what fascinating people they were. I would say I was about as non-traditional as you're going to get. Um, there now are people who are newly released from prison. That might have been a non-traditional population a while ago. Maybe they feel a little uncomfortable there, but there are special programs for them that are really terrific. They run the gamut from what goes on academically to the ways that they can help keep their life in a great path and find people who
mhm,
understand them. So what is a non-traditional student anymore? I mean,
mhm.
there are 9-year-olds going to college and 70-year-olds going to college and
Yeah.
people who never had college in their families before. I was a first generation college student, and I think we have gotten rid of a lot of the ideas of tradition in our lives, and as far as I'm concerned, that's largely a good thing.
Yeah, when I was in community college 20 years ago, uh, yeah, there were older students, there were younger students, for people of all walks of life, people who were just taking class for fun, people who were doing changing careers. It was one of the best things about community college that I got to meet people that I would have never otherwise met. I guess everybody was non-traditional, or
Yeah,
or the opposite.
yeah, I think that's true. And I think though our Cal States have a fair number of students like
Mhm,
that, when you go to a really, traditional, maybe private nonprofit
mhm.
four-year college, you're going to be somewhat limited in the range of
Yeah,
people that you meet,
yeah.
which
I
isn't
think
a good thing.
I feel like that's the benefit of going to a place like a community college, just the different people that are out there.
Yeah. So, in terms of
Mm,
fields you can go into, I mean, it's almost endless. I was really, I would just put out there, oh yeah, I found some people on Reddit. You just say, hey, does anybody do this? And all
mhm,
of a sudden people come out of nowhere, Is anybody former military who found a good life after the military? And people just start coming out of the woodwork. Um, I met one guy who was went to the Marines because he wanted to go to college on the GI Bill.
Mhm,
He worked in intelligence in the Marines. And after he got out of the Marines, he realized he had so many contacts in the intelligence world that he did not need a college degree. So
mhm.
he works as a consultant to a federal agency that I can't mention, and he's making close to $200,000 a year. He's a young man.
So there are many kind of possibilities that are out there are interesting, and I think a lot of the ways that people found these possibilities, and you mentioned, doing this online search, talking to people, and there was a question that I think the answer is yes to, and the question is, do you think networking and building relationships is more important than having a degree in certain fields?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I certainly think that to be an engineer, you need to have certain degrees, certain kinds of training. I think that to be a neurologist, I would definitely prefer that you had gone to medical school. I would also prefer that a lot of doctors worked on their interpersonal skills a little bit. Um, but overall, in the larger business world, a lot of the world is about who you know and how do you know them if you don't go out and meet them, and how do people love having you in their workplace and want to work with you if you're not a great person to be with. How do they know you have
Mhm,
curiosity and ambition if you don't go up to the people in your workplace who are doing good stuff and say to them, I'm really interested in what you do, can I help out in any
mhm.
way, even in just my spare time? And you never know where that's going to lead you. You just have to be open to the possibilities. And yes, open to the people is the most important thing I can think of. Again, in the STEM fields, in the science, technology, engineering fields, probably less so. But in the other fields, I think that's a prime skill. I wish we
Yeah,
taught kids that skill.
the skill of being able to connect.
Yeah. Yeah, when I went to visit MIT with one of my kids, in their presentation, they said they actually give social training
Mhm,
classes for their students because a fair number of STEM majors might be a little bit more comfortable on their own, which is,
mhm,
there's nothing wrong with that. We need to accept that people are different and need to do their own thing.
mhm,
But there are times when you need to get out there and meet people and not hide away in a corner much as we want to. And so
mhm.
they actually teach them how to do it.
So this next question is, it kind of, I feel like, moves flows from that. Do you have any advice for someone who's in their mid-20s and still feels like they're unclear on what career they want? I mean,
I
I almost want to even make that question a little bit more pointed and specific. Like, what is the piece of advice you would give to a person in their 20s who's unclear about?
You know, number one, I would reassure you that you're about like, I don't know, 75 or 80% of people your age. It's very, very common not to really know. Part of what I tell people is don't go to college if you have no idea why it is you're going to college. If you're going because it's the end of high school and you think that's the next thing you're supposed to do, or you think you will magically stumble into what it is you're supposed to do for the rest of your life, the way many of us discover our futures is by going out there and doing. So, it feels sort of scary because we're shutting off all other avenues when we pick a road, but go pick a road and follow it and see where that takes you. See what you like about it. See what you don't like about it. Pay attention to what's going on around you because something's going to come along that you probably like more. There are
Mhm,
very few people in the book who just came out of high school and said, I'm going for this and I'm going to
mhm,
do this. And they did that. And that was their career. Hardly
mhm,
anybody. They stumbled around, they tried this, they tried that, they traveled, they learned about what it was they liked, and then they'd see a situation or they'd fall into a situation or they'd meet a person and a light would go on. And they'd
mhm,
say, wow, this sounds good. And there is no one thing you were meant to be the rest of your life. That's an old-fashioned way of thinking. That was something that belonged to my generation, and it got outmoded a good 20 years ago, I think.
mhm,
People, what you need is the ability to be flexible. You need the ability to learn. That's why you should keep learning. You should keep being educated because you're going to be stultified if you don't bother being an interesting person, a person who's interested in the world and what's going on around you and the different fields around you. So
Mhm.
maybe this is what you'll do now, and it's not what you'll be doing in 10 years, 15 years, and you'll find something that you make a lot more money at that point, or something that's way more interesting to you or more meaningful to you. So I would say put a lot less stress into it. Go do something.
Mhm.
That's how you learn what you like to do.
And I mentioned this in other programs. The library is a second or third career for so many people. So the possibilities are open. And there's a question that I wanted to ask because Karen, you've talked to so many different people with a variety of careers. We have a person asking, what career paths will look over the fact that somebody is a felon or has, face tattoos?
Um, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I know all the answers to that because I didn't really look at that. I bet you could research it and you could find it. Here in California, we have been passing laws that restrict what employers can do right off the bat. Like I can't just ask you, were you ever convicted of anything? They have to get
Mhm.
to know you as a person, and then eventually that issue might come up. Um, but there are probably some jobs where it would be very difficult to get the job, especially public facing jobs. There are others where people have tolerant hearts and open
Mhm.
hearts and realize that what we wear on our faces and on our bodies is not who we are. It's just one aspect of what we chose to do at some point. And, tattoos are a little more permanent than what we chose to wear that day. But I think as we start encouraging employers to look at skills and abilities, um, I think that they will see much more openness about that. I do see people as getting more open and less judgmental about a lot of things.
Mhm.
There was one of the ways I learned about programs for recently released people was from prison
Mhm.
was I needed to go to school very early for a field trip, and I was the only person in the parking lot. And then this car pulled up and this guy got out who had tattoos everywhere. And we struck up a conversation. And it turns out that what he does is he counsels the students at the school who are recently released felons. And we were talking all about what he does. And he's so enthusiastic about it and he loves it. He's not a volunteer, he makes money at this. So
Mhm.
sometimes you can turn what you think is something that's going to stop your career into something that's actually going to help your career because certain people will see you as more authentic because of your tattoos. So find the environment that accepts you as you are.
Mhm. I think at least three possibilities would be in the culinary field. A lot of people in the culinary
Yeah.
field have tattoos. Um, Almost completely opposite, like the library. I know a bunch of librarians and library workers who have tattoos. It's doesn't unless maybe you're in a very small town or maybe more of a conservative area, but in most places, library people don't care if you have tattoos. And
Yeah.
then,
Skilled
of course, the
trades.
trades. Yeah,
Yeah. Skilled trades are a great place for
yeah.
that. A lot of things in travel, overseas work, uh, farming, that one of, I
Mhm.
mean, I don't think he's tattooed, but, one of the people in the book is a farmer who started
Mhm.
out by doing overseas work. And, I don't think farming cares about that. I don't think ranching cares about that.
Mhm.
But I think when you let your personality out there, people do tend to respond. And yeah, it's a little bit of a setback in certain fields. So too bad on them. You'll find other fields that are thrilled to have you the way you are.
So I'm gonna go through, I guess it's around noontime here, so I'm gonna just start going through these. We've got some questions. I'm gonna start going through them. So let's see. So the first question is a bigger question. What other factors of the pandemic do you think made college not always the first step for young people today?
Well, I think number one, a lot of jobs opened up. And that is
Mhm.
and there is actually a movement to open more jobs to people without college degrees that started as a result of the pandemic and the resulting shortage of qualified workers. So that had a big part to do with it. I think as people started going about doing their own work when they couldn't go to college for a while. They started finding their own possibilities, which made them, which opened the door to thinking about, oh, maybe I don't have to go to college. Um, and also, I think a lot of families were put in hard financial straits. And as much as California does to help people who are seeking higher education, a lot of states aren't like that, or sometimes it's not enough, even with what California does. And so people had to say, I just can't afford it. My family's just in awful shape here, and we need to try to rebuild ourselves as we are. I don't like that. I'm like I said, I'm not an anti-college person. I think affordable college should be available and accessible to the people
Mhm,
who want and are ready for a college education.
mhm. Whose path requires that or whose path needs that. But
Or who,
yeah, who just
not
want to do
always, I
it.
mean, what are you going to
Yeah.
call needs?
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to be a philosophy major and that's what you love. And as long
Hmm.
as you figure out how you're going to support yourself after that philosophy major,
Hmm.
that's great. And there are many ways to do it.
Yeah.
A lot of employers like the kind of critical thinking and writing ability that goes with being a philosophy major. But it
Hmm.
can be just for the pure joy of learning. I love the pure joy of learning.
Hmm.
Um, but and so I think that should be accessible to people also. But I think when people couldn't go, they started thinking, do I really want to go? Do I really need to go?
Hmm.
Maybe there are other paths that are valid for me. And then that became a whole nationwide conversation. Where my book comes in is that I think as a society, we've accepted the idea that college is not for everybody, or college right after high school is not for everybody. What we haven't done is tell them or the new college graduates, what's my next step?
Hmm.
And that's what this book is supposed to help with.
And it does so. So the next question is, why do you feel most people stop reading books after college?
Oh, this pains my heart so badly.
Me too.
Um, when my eldest is a lover of literature, and and she read voraciously and read difficult works. And she was in AP English in her senior year of high school. And she came home and she said, Mom, do you know today the teacher asked how many of us do reading for pleasure outside of class? And I was the only person who raised my hand. And I thought, wow, AP English. I mean, these should be people who love English literature. It should be what they live for. But I think our society has gotten somewhat reductive, and we think in terms of what we have to do to get by. So students in college often do, and I have people in the family who are academics, and they see students who want to know what they have to do
Mhm,
and what they need to do to get this grade. And will you be providing a study guide? So I know exactly what I need to for that test instead of loving the learning. And so once we start saying that's an okay thing to do, and it's not about opening your mind and heart to actual learning, we set the path for people to not think that learning itself is an important thing. Maybe we need to do better in our classes to make people realize the great things that they can get out of reading so that they enjoy it. I mean, I loved reading from a very, very early age when my mom would read to me and I was a preschooler, and my older sister could read and I didn't know how to read yet. And I lived in panic that I was never going to learn how to read. It seemed like an impossible thing to unlock all those squiggles on the page into being a meaningful story. And I loved stories. And my mom kept saying to me, Karin, you're going to learn to read. I promise you, you're going to
mhm,
learn to read. And I worked so hard to learn to read. So to me, that is, to have the access to those stories and the information is just such a great thing. And of course, there's the internet now, and the internet caters to a shorter attention span. And that's, we can debate that endlessly, but I find in my own life, it's true. I actually, because I have to spend a lot of time on the internet looking things up, doing research, I find that it actually is a little harder for me to pick up a book and open the pages and start reading. I do it and I love it, but it is not as easy as it used to be.
not enough people are taking avail of the reader's advisory service that libraries offer, where you can ask for recommendations. Because, of course, in Ranganathan's Five Laws of Library Science, number 2 is every reader his book, and number 3 is every book its reader. So if you find the
That's a
right
very good
book for
point.
people.
That's a good point. I think even as newspapers, we tend to review certain kinds of books that might not
Mm,
be the books for everybody. And it's great to have some kind of group that is aligned with your interests and the kind of reading you like to do to suggest books that you might like. But it's the numbers of teenagers who read for pleasure has absolutely plummeted in this country over the past 40 years. It's a very sad thing. And I fear that if we're talking about lack of ability to do critical thinking, people who don't read for pleasure, who don't pick up a book for any reason other than they have to, that would be a pretty, that would be high on my suspicion list.
It's an interesting trend because in publishing, the young adult literature has sort of ballooned over the last, 20 years, where before it was, teen books were just kind of part of youth. And over the past few decades, young adult literature, books for teens are now its very own section, and every Barnes and Noble has a ton of books for teens. So it's an interesting um, sort of anti-trend, cross-trend, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the teens who are reading a lot,
Mhm,
and too many teens aren't reading at all,
yeah.
is where that comes from.
So there's a question here that I kind of covered before, but I'll ask in a slightly different way. So this question is, how did you choose the people or professions you interviewed for the book? And we kind of already covered that, but I want to know, did what was there serendipity involved, or did you say, I want to find a hairdresser, and then you joined a group of stylists on Facebook? What was the serendipity involved in finding your
Yeah,
interviewees?
there was some of each. There were, like I said, I joined specific groups and said, I want to find a costume designer. Actually, for costume designers, because I know so many young people are interested in fashion and costume design, and I wanted to open people to the idea that you can work in the entertainment industry without being Nicole Kidman.
Mm,
There's a whole lot of jobs that are what they call below the line jobs. And so I specifically, I didn't come up with anything in the costume networking group on Facebook, although I will tell you that I love that group so much
mm,
that I kept them as a group and read them regularly. The bunch of the nicest people who help each other with the quirkiest problems. But I called the union for that one, the
mm,
costume union. There were other ones where I would just put out on social media or on Reddit, um, you know, has anybody is anybody living a life that you feel is a meaningful, fulfilling life for you, and you don't have a bachelor's degree? And that's where a lot of that's where the video editor came in.
mm.
Um, and then, I wanted some people who had worked in, because I have a chapter on volunteer work. I called a couple of people on that, but I also just put stuff out on social media. So it's a combination of the two. Sometimes I just ask people I know, hey, do you know anybody
Yeah.
who does this?
Mm.
Or I'd tell people about the book and they'd say, oh, you know who you want to talk to?
Uh, let's do two more questions because we're getting down to the wire here. Here's a question. Asking for a friend. What advice do you have for a person who's allergic to the idea of turning a thing they love into a job? Is there a mental workaround for an income resistant person?
Um, well, I'm not sure if the question is that you are income resistant, as in you do not want to work or do not want an income, or whether it's that you don't want to take something that you love in a very pure way
Mhm,
and start commercializing that, because that will, in fact, probably affect how you are able to follow through on that hobby. Um, I work around. I think you start out small and you see how it feels, and it's not the rest of your life, it's not your whole life, you just do something small. I've done little businesses on the side. um like I said, in the book I talk about my love of hiking, and my love of
mm,
hiking led to my volunteering at the park, and my volunteering at the park led to my becoming a certified naturalist, because I wanted to learn more about it. um and then this contract to write a hiking book sort of dropped in my lap out of nowhere. Someone asked a friend of mine whether she wanted to write a hiking book, and she doesn't even walk outside. So she said, "Oh, you should talk to Karin Klein. She does a lot of hiking." And so they talked to me, and next thing I knew, I was writing a hiking book, and I was able to shape it in the way I wanted to, which is to be like a naturalist and educate
Mhm.
people about the extraordinary stories of the trails. And, I don't feel like I sold out at all on that. I think that was a thrill that added, it actually added a lot to my knowledge of hiking and my knowledge of the trails. So I am now a better, deeper hiker as a
Mhm.
result of doing that. I recently hiked in Ireland, and while my partner was taking pictures of the seashore and the pastures, I was taking pictures of the wildflowers and comparing them with what are the similar wildflower here, to the flowers there. They're the same family, but they're different. And I'm sort of a flower nerd, a wildflower nerd. I don't know much about cultivated flowers. And so that was a great thing for me. I just view the world through that sort of lens. Um, if you don't want to do that, then, find something else you like doing. But, no one says you have to turn your hobby into your living. But if you love doing it, you might try an aspect of it and see how that goes, or just think of something else you like that's not as important to you, but you still like it.
So this is a good question to end on here, and the question is, uh, for the people in your book who have succeeded at finding a purposeful and like lucrative enough life without college, what factors contributed to their success?
That was so different for each person. I would have to say that the two things that really contributed to their success were, number one, most of them had interpersonal skills. Most of them
Mhm.
like people, most of them like getting out into the world. That was not every single one of them, but for almost every single one of them, that was a very important part of their personal makeup. When I had to get back in touch with people to ask if they had photos that they were willing to share, I got such enthusiastic and helpful responses from people. And it was like we had really formed a connection. That ability to form a connection really seems to be a hallmark of people who have made a good life for themselves. One of the people in my book is a young woman who wasn't able to finish high school because her bipolar disorder required medication
Mhm.
that that interfered too much with her schoolwork. She worked her way up in a supermarket to be the bakery manager, but she found a community. This is mainly what makes her happy. Those people at that supermarket form a circle around her, um, and protect her and care for her. And she knows she's never alone. And meanwhile, on the side, she writes terrific poetry. And I have an
Mhm.
example of it in the book.
Truly.
She's not making a bazillion dollars, but her desire to have that connection with people is what led to her being promoted, is what led to her great feeling about her work. And the second thing, and it's funny that someone said to me, well, it seems to me that the people you picked for the book are they're just special people, so you're talking about a narrow group of people. And I thought about that for a moment and I said, no, not really, not at all. When I think about them, like I said, they were sort of wandering around, wondering what they were going to
Mhm.
do with their lives, doing a bit of this, doing a bit of that, doing a bit of nothing. What all of them had in common was that they were willing to take the road that did not involve going for a bachelor's.
Mhm.
Or when the bachelor's wasn't working out for them, which a couple of art students said, they really hated college because they felt the professors wanted everything to be their idea of what good art was. Um, they were willing to say, this is not for me. And I believe
Mhm.
in myself enough to go try something else. Maybe it'll work out. Maybe you'll go to college. You'll certainly be one of the most interesting college applicants around if you've gone out and experienced something. But what made them special was their willingness to say, I'm going to believe in myself enough to go out and explore and discover something about life and myself.
There may be people with unusual careers in the book, but I would say most of them it's just like you said, they're people just like us, like, they're you out there. The people out
Yeah.
there like me, like you, Karin, like all of us.
Yeah, they're sales managers. One is a woman who was going for her master's in sociology and switched to becoming an electrician. There are people, yeah, there's a guy who views the entire world through sound. He had dyslexia and learning to read was tough, and sound meant everything to him. And he's one of the biggest sound designers in Hollywood, incredibly successful. But what made him special was that by the end of our very long talk, I was seeing the whole world in sound for several
Mm,
hours
that's so
afterward. And
interesting.
I still can get back in that because he thinks about sound. It means
Hmm.
something to him. So that's an exceptional thing, but most of these people are not, they're in marketing because they tend to be very personable. Some of them are programming. Um, there are all kinds of things. Some of them are immensely interesting things, that you and I would find immensely interesting. What I care about is it immensely interesting to them?
Exactly. Well, Karin, thank you so much for this delightful, engaging, informative talk. The book, Rethinking College, A Guide to Thriving Without a Degree, will be available from the library, and people will also be able to get it when it comes out in August. Is that right?
Comes out August 13th.
Mhm.
If it's okay to give a plug that might
Of
save
course.
people a little bit of money, I think it's starting today that
Mm,
Barnes and Noble for a few days, I'm not sure how many, 4 or 5 days, is having 25% off all pre-orders. Not just my book. I
mm,
think it's all pre-orders. So it's a good place to save yourself some money if you're interested in purchasing the book, but it also
mm.
should be available via the library.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in the book, get it one way or the other. I've read it. I've reread it this morning, and I highly recommend it. And thank you for writing it, Karen. It's a book that, like you said before, it really speaks to what a lot of people are thinking about now.
Well, I'm really glad if
Yeah,
that's true. And thank you for inviting me here. And thank you to everybody for listening. That's really great. And thanks for your questions, which really made me think.
of course. Yeah, the questions came from me, came from a lot of our audience members. They're so great about the questions. That it's really nice that people are active in the chat, in the Q&A. Before we conclude, I also just want to quickly request that folks fill out our post-event survey. It's very short, just a few questions, takes a few minutes, but it's very important to us that we know how you feel about the program and what we can cover in the future. All right.
And if you have any other questions, I don't know, Oleg, how you work it, but if you have
Yeah.
other questions that you weren't able to get addressed and you pass them on to Oleg and Oleg passes them
Mhm.
on to me, I'll try to get you answers.
Yeah, I'll send a follow-up email probably tomorrow morning or maybe later today. And yeah, if you respond to that email, I'll be happy to pass that on to Karen. All
Thanks a
right.
lot, Oleg. I really appreciate this. It's
Thanks,
been
Karen.
great.
And
Bye-bye,
thank
everyone.
you all out there, and we'll see you next time.